Justice Jackson also dissented. He pointed out the racism involved, and he warned that courts really can do very little to control the military. He argued that Fred Korematsu did nothing wrong. He said, were he a German or an Italian citizen, or a U.S. citizen convicted of treason but out on parole, only Korematsu's presence on the West Coast as a person of Japanese descent would violate the military order. In chilling language, he wrote, and let me quote it for you, that the order is an attempt to make an otherwise innocent act a crime merely because this prisoner is the son of parents as to whom he had no choice and belongs to a race from which there is no way to resign. Jackson then turned to the relationship between the court and the military, and he argued that the court is ill-equipped to examine the constitutionality of military orders. This was because military orders, he said, involve questions of evidence, of judgment, and of secrecy. Given this, however, he said, courts can refuse if they choose to enforce them. He put it this way: if we cannot confine military expedience by the Constitution, neither would I distort the Constitution to approve all that the military may deem expedient. Otherwise, we may as well say that any military order will be constitutional and have done with it. Further, he warned that bad Supreme Court decisions can set precedent for the future. An unconstitutional military order lasts only as long as the emergency, but bad Supreme Court decisions last longer. Let me read again what he said. Once a judicial opinion rationalizes the Constitution to show that the Constitution sanctions such an order, the court for all time has validated the principle of racial discrimination in criminal procedure and of transplanting American citizens. The principle then lies around like a loaded weapon, ready for the hand of any authority that can bring forward a plausible claim of an urgent need. But if the courts can't act, what will keep the military in check? Well, Jackson says in the end, it's only American citizens that can do that. All that will keep military commanders in check, Jackson wrote, will be their responsibility to the political judgments of their contemporaries and to the moral judgments of history. This was a dissent, though, and the program was upheld. Legally, Korematsu versus the United States stands for 2 points. One, that the court will give great deference to the military in times of war. And second, that it will apply strict scrutiny when the government classifies people on the basis of race. Although not used to overturn the discrimination in this case, strict scrutiny did become the standard for racial classifications. Now, is there anything to be said for the decision? Well, some have argued that deference to the military is important. As it has been said, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. Indeed, Justice Douglas, who voted with the majority, basically defended his vote in 1974, noting that at the time Korematsu was decided, there was a real threat of invasion. A second defense is that modern war may require total commitment of a population, and it could be that 1944 was too soon to act boldly. Perhaps allowing Japanese Americans to return to the West Coast would have caused riots. But opinion has turned against these defenses. Mr. Korematsu reopened his case in 1984, and the Federal District Court vacated the conviction. Indeed, in 1988, Congress passed a bill giving all living survivors of the camps a $20,000 payment. Let me read to you what the preamble of the bill said. For these fundamental violations of the basic civil liberties and constitutional rights of these individuals of Japanese ancestry, the Congress apologizes on behalf of the nation. The U.S. has paid more than 81,000 Japanese Americans $20,000 each. But it turns out there's more to the story. On August 28, 1997, the American Civil Liberties Union filed a suit on behalf of more than 2,000 Japanese from Latin America who were imprisoned in U.S. internment camps during World War II. Turns out the U.S. interned people of Japanese ancestry from 13 Latin American countries, mostly from Peru. And the lawsuit centered on the claims that they were forcibly shipped to the U.S. to be used as hostages to exchange for U.S. citizens trapped in the war zone controlled by the Japanese. The story of one young man, Arturo Shibayama, is really quite revealing. He was 13 when he and his family were forcibly taken from Peru and involuntarily shipped to the U.S. aboard a U.S. military vessel. He was interned in a camp outside of Crystal City, Texas. He spent the next 2.5 years behind barbed wire, guarded by soldiers in watchtowers. Eventually, he was freed and he ended up in San Jose, California, where he ran a service station. Shockingly, he was denied U.S. citizenship for years on the grounds that he had entered the U.S. as an illegal alien. This was despite a 2-year stint in the U.S. Army and an honorable discharge. He was finally allowed to become a citizen in 1970. Now, the U.S. settled this lawsuit. It gave 600 survivors $5,000 each and a letter of apology from President Clinton. I'd like to read you what the President wrote. I offer a sincere apology for the actions that unfairly denied you fundamental liberties during World War II. We understand that our nation's actions were rooted in racial prejudice and wartime hysteria, and we must learn from the past and dedicate ourselves as a nation to renewing and strengthening equality, justice, and freedom.